The truth does not knock politely. Sometimes it kicks the door off the hinges, shatters the windows, and forces everyone who was perfectly comfortable sitting in the dark to stare at the harsh, undeniable light of reality. Most people do not actually hate intelligence, and they certainly do not hate authenticity. What they absolutely despise is the way your intelligence, your authenticity, and your silent elevation make them feel about their own manufactured, highly performative lives. Chosen ones, I am speaking directly to you today. You are currently navigating a deeply bizarre, almost comical season of your spiritual awakening. You have pulled back your energy. You have retreated into your own sanctuary of personal growth, healing, and internal alignment. And in response to your quiet isolation, you are hearing the most absurd, unhinged, and entirely fabricated rumors about yourself. You are hearing that you are living a double life. You are hearing that you have some dark, hidden agenda, or that you are secretly spiraling out of control. I want to validate exactly what you are experiencing right now, because it is heavy, it is confusing, and it can make you question reality itself. You are sitting in absolute peace, minding your own business, watering your own grass, and yet somehow you have become the main character in a fictional drama written by people who barely even know you anymore. Today, we are going to break down the exact psychological and spiritual architecture of why insecure, toxic, and stagnant people are currently exposing themselves by trying to compete with a version of you that only exists in their heads. We are going to expose why your absence caused them to completely melt down, and why they are making up elaborate stories out of sheer, unadulterated boredom. Let us get into it. Let us break down exactly why their fragile egos require you to be the villain in a story they completely invented out of thin air. Before we dive into the core of this psychological breakdown, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, drop a comment with what point hit you hardest, and share this video with someone who needs the reminder. Number 1. They project their own fractured, two-faced identity onto your quiet, unshakable peace. When someone accuses you of living a double life while you are simply living a private life, you are witnessing one of the most classic psychological defense mechanisms in human history: pure, unadulterated projection. The contrast here is staggering and impossible to ignore. Your internal architecture is built on absolute alignment. The person you are in the dark is the exact same person you are in the light. You have done the grueling, unglamorous shadow work required to integrate your flaws, your fears, and your strengths into one solid, authentic identity. Contrast this with their borrowed, insecure, and performative facade. Their external performance is deeply fractured. They survive by wearing an exhausting rotation of masks, carefully curating their personality depending on who is in the room. To them, the concept of being whole and authentic is literally incomprehensible. Therefore, their deeply fragile ego cannot accept that your peace is genuine. The deep psychology at play here is a profound fear of their own duality, because they live a double life, smiling to people's faces while plotting behind their backs, preaching morality while acting with cruelty. They assume you must be doing the exact same thing. They are terrified of the internal war they fight every single day, and to alleviate that cognitive dissonance, they have to believe that everyone else is just as fake as they are. It is the only way they can look in the mirror without collapsing under the weight of their own hypocrisy. Metaphorically, they are like a frantic thief walking through a quiet neighborhood, constantly checking their own pockets because they assume everyone else is a thief too. They are frantically stacking cheap cards on a windy table, terrified of the inevitable collapse, while you are quietly stacking heavy bricks on solid, immovable ground. They call your life a double life because the idea of a singular, integrated, honest life feels like a fairy tale to someone bankrupt of true character. Elaborating extensively on this, you must understand how goofy and tragic this looks from the outside. They are essentially screaming their own confessions at you while pretending they are accusations. They spend hours dissecting your silent existence, completely unaware that they are just providing a highly detailed map of their own internal corruption. They are telling you exactly who they are, disguising it as a critique of who you are. They see your calm, but they do not understand the resilience it took to build it. They see your quiet, but they cannot fathom the integrity that sustains it. This frantic projection is the ultimate proof that your authenticity is completely destroying their carefully constructed illusions. Number 2, your absolute silence creates a terrifying psychological void that their chronic boredom is forced to fill with fiction. There is a profound, almost terrifying power in a chosen one's silence. When you stop oversharing, when you stop posting every minor detail of your day, and when you stop justifying your existence to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you create a massive vacuum. The contrast is between your grounded stillness and their chaotic, desperate noise. You no longer provide them with the data they need to judge you, categorize you, or feel superior to you. You are completely self-sourced, internally validated, and entirely unbothered by the gallery. Contrast this with their frantic need for an audience. They live on an external drip of validation, requiring constant stimulation, constant drama, and constant reaction just to feel alive. When you cut off the supply of information, they begin to panic. The deep psychology here revolves around their loss of control and their terror of the unknown. Because human nature, especially unhealed human nature, absolutely abhors a vacuum, they are forced to invent the data you refuse to provide. When they cannot read you, they cannot control the narrative around you. So, their frantic minds go into overdrive, spinning wild, baseless stories to fill the terrifying silence you have left behind. Their boredom is not just a lack of hobbies. It is a symptom of severe spiritual stagnation. They have no purpose of their own, so they must hijack yours. Metaphorically, it is exactly like sitting in an entirely empty, dark movie theater. If the screen is blank, a terrified, unhealed mind will project its own horror movie onto the canvas just to have something to react to. You are the quiet, sacred cathedral, and they are standing outside in the cold, throwing rocks at the stained glass, screaming that the building must be full of monsters simply because the heavy wooden doors are locked. Let us linger on the mechanics of this situation. They are expending massive amounts of life force energy to write a fictional script about a person who does not even care that they exist, while their own lives rot from neglect. It looks entirely frantic and pathetic. They gather in their little echo chambers, whispering about the secret life you must be leading, completely ignoring the fact that their own lives are passing them by. They are terrified of the silence because in the silence, they are forced to hear the deafening sound of their own wasted potential. They see the calm, but they refuse to understand the internal peace that generates it, preferring to believe you are simply hiding a storm. Number 3. You force people to confront the profound intelligence and spiritual depth that they voluntarily abandoned. When a chosen one commits to radical growth and healing, it acts as a massive, inescapable mirror, reflecting the stagnation of everyone who chose to remain comfortable. The contrast is visceral and undeniable. Your evolution is fluid, hard-earned, and internally validated. You are constantly expanding, learning, and refining your spirit. Contrast this with their rigid, scripted existence, which is entirely dependent on the applause of a mediocre crowd. They have plateaued. They have accepted a highly performative, low-vibrational existence because it is easier to blend in than it is to stand out. When they see you thriving, ascending, and operating on a frequency they cannot even tune into, they experience a violent cognitive dissonance. The deep psychology of the imitator and the gossip is rooted in the preservation of their incredibly fragile ego. To protect themselves from the crushing realization that they settled for a lesser life, they have to tear down your success. They invent the double life rumor because it serves as a psychological safety net. If they can convince themselves and others that your success is dirty, fake, or hiding some dark secret, then they do not have to feel bad about their own lack of movement. They need your alignment to be a scam so their stagnation feels like a choice. Metaphorically, it is like someone who lives in a decaying, rotting house, looking across the street at the beautiful, sturdy mansion you built with your own bare hands. Instead of asking you for blueprints or learning how to build, they stand in their overgrown, weed-infested yard and scream to the neighbors that your house must be built on a graveyard or funded by stolen money. They act like someone wearing gaudy, heavy jewelry they maxed out credit cards to afford, furious that you are commanding the room while wearing nothing but your quiet confidence. To elaborate on this tragedy, you must realize how much pain they are actually in. It is a frantic, deeply embarrassing display of insecurity as they try to explain away your brilliance to soothe the ache of their own mediocrity. They see the confidence, but not the internal battles you fought to secure it. They see the calm, but not the resilience required to maintain it in a world that constantly begs you to compromise. Their obsession with your supposed double life is simply their way of grieving the life they were too cowardly to build for themselves. They are entirely consumed by the realization that you actually did the work they only pretended to do. Number 4. They fundamentally mistake your healthy, fortified boundaries for a hidden, sinister life. Chosen ones eventually reach a point in their journey where access to their energy is no longer a public commodity. You have learned the hard way that not everyone deserves a front-row seat to your life. The contrast here is between your sacred self-preservation and their toxic, boundaryless entitlement. You operate with deep discernment, carefully choosing who gets to experience the depths of your heart, your plans, and your vulnerabilities. You protect your peace like a heavily guarded vault. Contrast this with their chaotic, externally validated bulletin board of an existence. They operate on a paradigm of enmeshment, where everyone is supposed to know everything about everyone, where trauma is treated as social currency, and where oversharing is mistaken for intimacy. When you suddenly install a massive vault door on your life, their immediate reaction is intense suspicion. The psychological mechanics at play here are driven by an aggressive, infantile entitlement. They genuinely believe that they own the right to know your business, your struggles, and your movements. When you deny them this access, their ego completely fractures. They cannot compute the idea of healthy privacy, so they automatically categorize it as deceit. To them, if you are not oversharing, you must be hiding something illegal, immoral, or dark. Metaphorically, it is as if you have cultivated a beautiful, lush, walled garden. You sit peacefully inside, enjoying the fruits of your labor and the quiet of the morning. The people outside, who are used to walking all over your lawn and picking your flowers for free, are suddenly faced with a high stone wall. Instead of respecting the wall, they stand outside in the dirt, telling anyone who will listen that you are secretly brewing poison inside. Let us elaborate on how incredibly goofy this behavior is. They are literally jumping up and down outside a wall they cannot scale, demanding entry into a property they do not own. They view your independence as a direct attack on their relevance. They accuse you of living a double life merely because they are no longer invited to participate in your actual life. They mistake your high-level self-respect for a malicious secret, exposing their own inability to exist without constantly feeding off the energy of others. They are frantically scratching at the steel doors of your vault, completely exhausted by the realization that their manipulative skeleton keys no longer work on your locks. Number 5. Their chronic boredom is a critical symptom of a soul that has entirely abandoned its own divine purpose. Let us break down the exact nature of the boredom that drives these people to make up elaborate, unhinged stories about you. This is not the mild boredom of waiting in line at the grocery store. This is an existential, soul-crushing void. The contrast between your existence and theirs is the difference between an overflowing fountain of purpose and a barren, cracked desert of meaninglessness. You are deeply engaged in the business of your own becoming. You are building, creating, healing, and aligning with the divine frequency. You do not have time to obsess over the lives of others because your own life demands your full, undivided attention. Contrast this with their absolute abandonment of their post. They have ignored their own calling for so long that their internal landscape is completely desolate. The deep psychology of their gossip and fabrication is rooted in spiritual starvation. Because they generate no organic joy, no genuine passion, and no forward momentum in their own lives, they have to feed off the drama of others. They are energetic parasites. Making up stories about your supposed double life gives them a temporary, artificial spike of adrenaline. It makes them feel alive, important, and connected to something, even if that connection is rooted entirely in malice. Metaphorically, they are like a starving man sitting at a table made of dirt, frantically chewing on gravel and trying to convince the world he is enjoying a 5-star feast, all while glaring furiously through the window at you as you quietly enjoy a genuinely nourishing, beautifully prepared meal. You must understand the depth of this tragedy. Their obsession with your life is a tragic admission that their own life is too empty to hold their attention. They manufacture chaos because chaos is the only substitute they have for actual, meaningful purpose. When you observe this from a grounded, elevated perspective, you realize you do not need to be angry. You are just watching a fundamentally bankrupt soul trying to write a bad check using your good name. They are suffocating in their own stagnation, using your name as a life raft to keep themselves from drowning in obscurity. Their boredom is literally destroying them from the inside out, and they are using you as the ultimate distraction. Number 6. The sheer panic of being entirely unreadable completely shatters their fragile, manipulative ego. One of the greatest, most formidable weapons a chosen one possesses is their absolute unpredictability. You no longer react to the triggers that used to send you into a spiral. You no longer defend yourself against baseless accusations. You simply observe, completely detached from the outcome. The contrast here is between your absolute, sovereign emotional regulation and their frantic reactionary dysregulation. You are entirely centered, while they are constantly bouncing off the walls of their own insecurities. They are used to pushing a button and getting a specific, chaotic response from you. They are used to a script where they throw an insult, and you desperately try to prove your worth. When you burn that script and replace it with unbothered silence, they experience an existential panic. The deep psychological truth is that toxic people rely entirely on predictability to feel safe. If they can predict your emotional response, they feel they have power and control over you. Your newfound unreadability strips them of all their power. They make up stories about a double life as an act of sheer desperation, trying to throw whatever they can against the wall in hopes that something, anything, will force you to break character and react. Metaphorically, they used to read you like a simple, brightly colored children's pop-up book. Now, you have evolved into a complex masterpiece of advanced cryptography, written in a language they do not even possess the alphabet to understand. They are violently flipping the pages, furious that the pictures are gone and the words make no sense to their limited comprehension. elaborate on the mechanics of their frustration. Their rumors are essentially their way of crying out for the old you, the version of you that was small enough, weak enough, and predictable enough for them to control. Your calm, unshakable demeanor is a daily, painful reminder of their own lack of self-mastery. They see the peace, but they do not see the absolute discipline required to withhold a reaction. They are desperately trying to drag you back into the mud, entirely unaware that you have already learned how to fly. They invent a double life because admitting you are simply at peace means admitting they have absolutely zero influence over your reality. Number 7. They continuously confuse a highly guarded private life with a deceitful life because society has taught them that visibility equals virtue. We live in an era where people fundamentally believe that if something is not posted on the internet, it did not happen. If a struggle is not broadcasted for sympathy, it is not real. The contrast is your deep, internal spiritual economy versus their cheap, external economy of constant validation. You understand that the most sacred, transformative moments of a human life happen in the dark, in private, between you and the divine. You do not need a crowd to validate your healing. Contrast this with their absolute addiction to the spotlight. They believe that their entire worth is tied to how much of their life is available for public consumption. When you step out of this toxic spotlight, their psychological conditioning completely short-circuits. Their fragile egos cannot comprehend a person who does not need an audience to feel real. Therefore, they equate your silence with deception. The psychology here is deeply tied to their own performative nature. Because everything they do is an act designed to be seen, they assume everything you hide is a sin meant to be concealed. They cannot grasp the concept of sacredness. Metaphorically, their life is a fragile, transparent glass house built on a busy intersection. They live in constant anxiety, desperately polishing the glass so everyone can see the fake plastic fruit on their dining table. You, however, live in a heavy, impregnable stone fortress in the middle of a quiet, ancient forest. You have real gold inside, but you feel absolutely no need to leave the drawbridge down for peasants to come and inspect it. You must linger on the absurdity of their outrage. They stand outside the forest, furious at your fortress, spreading rumors that the stone walls must be hiding a dungeon. They literally cannot process the concept that you are simply enjoying the warmth of your own hearth without needing them to applaud the fire. They view your privacy as an act of warfare, completely exposing their own terrifying lack of internal substance. They cannot survive without visibility, so your deliberate invisibility looks like an unfathomable magic trick that they must try to debunk. Number 8. The performative outrage they display is absolutely necessary. They need you to be the villain in order to justify their own stagnation. When someone begins making up wild stories about you, fabricating a supposed double life filled with drama, pay very close attention to how they act when they deliver this news. They are almost gleeful. They are performing outrage for an audience. The contrast here is between your quiet, continuous inner work and their loud, performative victimhood. You take absolute accountability for your own energy, your own failures, and your own growth. Contrast this with their constant auditioning for the role of the innocent bystander in a world that is supposedly out to get them. The deep psychology driving this behavior is their desperate, clawing need for a scapegoat. If you are doing well, if you are authentic, and if you are at peace, it removes all their excuses for why they are completely miserable. By turning you into a villain, by inventing a secret malicious side to your character, they create a narrative where they are the righteous, aggrieved party. It justifies their absolute lack of progress. Metaphorically, they are like a completely incompetent casting director of a tragic, failing theater production. Their play is terrible, the script is garbage, the actors are lost, and the audience has completely left the building. Instead of rewriting the script or improving their skills, they stand on the empty stage and point an accusing finger at you, the sovereign actor who walked out of the theater years ago to start your own successful studio. Elaborate on the profound sadness of this dynamic. They need the crowd to believe you sabotaged the play, because if they admit the truth that the play failed because they have no talent and no work ethic, their ego would completely shatter. Your existence as a peaceful, successful entity is an intolerable threat to their entire worldview, so they must invent a shadow version of you to attack. They are fighting a ghost of their own creation to avoid fighting the reality of their own reflection. The louder they scream about your alleged double life, the more they expose the paralyzing fear keeping them frozen in their own tracks. Number 9. The double life myth they aggressively peddle is actually a direct, unfiltered admission of their own two-faced reality. We must look deeply at the mechanics of accusation as confession. When an unhealed, deeply toxic individual accuses you of a specific behavior with absolutely no evidence, they are inadvertently handing you the exact, highly detailed blueprint of their own sins. The contrast is profound and unapologetic. You are striving for total internal integration, where your thoughts, words, and actions are in complete alignment, while they are living in a constant, agonizing state of fractured duality. They smile warmly at people they actively despise. They praise people they secretly envy. They act pious and righteous in public, yet operate with ruthless cruelty in private. The psychology of this is fascinating and incredibly dark. Because their own mind is a chaotic war zone of hypocrisy, they literally view the entire world through a lens of deceit. They cannot conceptualize a person who just means what they say. When they say you are living a double life, they are actually saying, I am living a double life, and because I cannot bear the guilt and exhaustion of it, I'm going to pretend you are doing it too, so my sickness feels normal. Metaphorically, they are swimming in a massive swamp of toxic sludge, swallowing mouthfuls of mud every single day, just to survive the environment they created. You have climbed out of the swamp, washed yourself clean, and are sitting on a dry, sunny rock. From the depths of the muck, they scream at you, claiming that you are secretly covered in mud under your clothes. Do not rush past the implications of this. They scream it because if you are truly clean, it means they have the option to be clean too, which means they are actively choosing the swamp. To avoid that terrifying responsibility, they must try to drag your reputation back into the mud with them. It is an entirely frantic, deeply transparent attempt to normalize their own dysfunctional reality. They are literally confessing their own crimes while pointing the finger at you. Their accusation is a desperate plea for company in their own misery. Number 10. Your refusal to over-explain yourself triggers their deep-seated, desperate need for control over your narrative. In the past, when someone misunderstood you or accused you of something, you probably rushed to correct them. You provided exhaustive evidence, you explained your heart, you bent over backwards to ensure they saw your good intentions. But as a chosen one, you have graduated from that exhausting people-pleasing phase. The contrast now is your absolute self-validation versus their desperate reliance on interrogation and submission. You know exactly who you are, and you no longer require their stamp of approval to sleep peacefully at night. When they make up a story about your double life and you simply ignore it, you deny them the very thing they wanted most, your frantic, defensive energy. The deep psychology of the imitator and the gossip is that they do not actually care if the story is true. They only care about the power dynamic the story creates. When they accuse you, they are placing themselves in the position of the judge and demanding that you step into the position of the trembling defendant. By refusing to take the stand, you completely collapse their courtroom. Metaphorically, they have set up a tiny, pathetic little interrogation room in their minds. They have a single swinging light bulb, a hard chair, and a long list of completely made-up charges. They are sitting there, waiting for you to walk in and submit to their questioning, but you are outside, walking under the vast open sky, completely ignoring the building they built for you. Elaborate on the devastating effect this has on their ego. Their frustration turns into absolute rage because your silence is an unanswerable form of dominance. It communicates, without a single word, that their opinions are so fundamentally worthless to your existence that they do not even warrant a defense. This shatters their illusion of importance, forcing them to sit alone in their fake courtroom with nothing but their own echoing insecurities. They see the calm, but they do not understand the absolute internal fortress that allows you to remain silent while being lied about. Your silence is the ultimate weapon against their desperate need to pull your strings. Number 11. The absolute tragedy of the spectator means they have become a captive audience to a life you are not even broadcasting. One of the most fascinating and bizarre aspects of this entire dynamic is the sheer amount of time and mental real estate these people dedicate to observing you. The contrast is between the living and the spectator. You are in the arena, covered in the dirt and sweat of your own genuine life, fighting your battles, healing your generational curses, and building your empire brick by heavy brick. Contrast this with their passive voyeuristic existence. They are sitting in the cheap seats of a stadium you never even invited them to, furiously taking notes on a game they fundamentally do not understand. The psychological mechanism here is rooted entirely in parasitism. Because they have no momentum of their own, no goals, and no divine drive, they have attached their entire identity to being the critic of your life. They manufacture the double life rumors because without a storyline about you, their own mind goes terrifyingly, agonizingly quiet. They are literally haunted by your progression. Metaphorically, it is like a ghost watching a living, breathing human being. The ghost cannot eat, cannot feel the warmth of the sun, and cannot build anything physical. All the ghost can do is observe the living person and rattle chains in the dark, hoping to cause a little bit of fear or disruption just to feel acknowledged. These people are emotional ghosts. They are haunting the periphery of your existence, making up stories out of the sheer agony of being immaterial. Elaborate on how completely goofy this looks from an elevated perspective. You are focused on the heavy, real, tangible bricks of your destiny, while they are violently swinging their arms at the air, trying to fight the shadow you cast on the ground. They are completely consumed by a version of you that does not even exist, missing out entirely on whatever fraction of a life they could have had if they just focused on themselves. They are spectators to their own demise, obsessed with a life they can never touch, projecting their own lack of agency onto your every move. Number 12. They simply cannot fathom a human being operating completely outside the cheap economy of external validation. The modern world runs on a very specific, very toxic currency: attention. The people making up these wild stories about your hidden life are completely, hopelessly enslaved by this economy. The contrast is your rich, self-sustaining internal economy versus their hyperinflated, entirely bankrupt external economy. You do things because they align with your spirit. You heal quietly. You succeed quietly. You help people quietly. You do not need a billboard to announce your alignment. Contrast this with their relentless need to be perceived. They do things exclusively for the applause, the likes, and the societal pat on the back. When they see you walking away from the game they are trying so hard to win, their brains essentially glitch. The psychological terror they experience is based on the absolute collapse of their value system. If you can be happy, successful, and at peace without constantly seeking the world's validation, then the entire foundation of their performative life is a complete lie. To reconcile this, they invent the double life. They convince themselves that because you aren't seeking public applause for your good deeds, you must secretly be seeking dark thrills in private. Metaphorically, they are trading in worthless fiat currency, gossip, likes, superficial praise, constantly worried about hyperinflation and emotional bankruptcy. You, however, have quietly transitioned your entire life to the gold standard. You hold solid, heavy, undeniable worth in the vault of your own soul. Linger on the absolute panic this causes them. When they look at you, they don't see any of their cheap paper money in your hands, so they scream that you must be broke. They cannot conceptualize the vault. They cannot understand that your silence is not a lack of value, but an abundance of wealth so secure it does not need to be displayed in the market square. Their stories are just the frustrated, panicked cries of the impoverished trying to understand the quietly rich. They are baffled by the fact that you refuse to wear your worth like cheap costume jewelry. Number 13. Gossip is a low-vibration, highly toxic currency exclusively used by those who are completely bankrupt of genuine substance. When we analyze the actual mechanism of them spreading these rumors about your supposedly chaotic double life, we must look at what gossip actually is at its core. The contrast between your creation and their destruction is stark and uncompromising. You use your words to build, to manifest, to pray, and to align with the divine. Your throat chakra is clear, purposeful, and anchored in truth. Contrast this with their use of language. Theirs is completely blocked by the sludge of their own malice. They use words to tear down, to infect, and to pollute the environment. The deep psychology of a gossiping hater is that they have absolutely nothing of value to offer to a conversation, a relationship, or the world at large. Because they possess no original thoughts, no deep insights, and no inspiring visions, they have to use your name as a placeholder for their own glaring lack of personality. They trade rumors about you because your name holds massive weight, and by speaking it, they momentarily feel heavy too. Metaphorically, you are holding flawless, uncut diamonds, your peace, your calling, your divine connection. You keep them highly secure. They are standing in a dirty alleyway, trading highly oxidized, worthless copper pennies, entirely convinced they are doing high-level business. When they whisper about your double life, they are just passing around the same filthy penny, hoping someone, anyone, will accept it as real currency. You must elaborate on the spiritual degradation of this act. When you realize that they only talk about you because their own lives do not provide enough material for a single interesting sentence, the anger you feel begins to dissolve into a clinical, detached pity. You realize they aren't even really attacking you. They are just using your shadow to hide their own absolute lack of substance. They are frantically trying to purchase relevance using the counterfeit money of their own delusions, entirely blind to how impoverished they actually look to anyone paying attention. Number 14. The inevitable catastrophic collapse of their completely fabricated narrative occurs when reality utterly refuses to validate their delusions. This is the final, most devastating phase for the people who have spent their time making up stories out of boredom. The contrast here is the ultimate test of time, your unshakable, deeply rooted reality versus their collapsing, paper-thin delusion. While they were busy spinning webs of lies, imagining your downfall, and convincing the cheap seats that you were living a dark double life, you were simply continuing to build. You kept stacking your heavy bricks. You kept clearing your energy. You kept walking unapologetically in your divine calling. The psychological breaking point for them occurs when the physical reality of your life becomes so undeniably blessed, elevated and solid that their lies simply cannot hold up against the visual evidence. They are violently forced to watch as the universe openly rewards the person they tried to paint as a villain. The panic sets in when the audience they curated begins to notice that the stories don't match the results. Metaphorically, they have spent months, maybe years, meticulously building a massive, intricate castle entirely out of papier-mâché and spit, painting it with the dark, toxic colors of their gossip about you. You have spent that same time silently carrying heavy stones, building an impenetrable fortress on a high cliff. Linger on the glorious destruction of their narrative. When the inevitable reign of truth comes, when life demands actual receipts, their papier-mâché castle completely dissolves into a soggy, pathetic pile of trash in the mud. They are left standing in the ruins of their own lies, covered in the running ink of their own false narratives, while you stand perfectly dry, elevated, and untouched behind walls of solid rock. The stories they made up out of boredom ultimately become the exact mechanism of their own public humiliation, because time is the ultimate enemy of a lie and the absolute best friend of the truth. They see the collapse, but they will never admit that they built the very trap they are dying in. The universe has exposed them, and your unbroken peace is the only proof that was ever needed. When you zoom out and look at all of this, when you elevate your perspective above the petty noise, the frantic whispers, and the desperate fabrications, one absolute truth becomes impossible to ignore. This was never about your physical actions. This was never about what you did or did not do in your daily life. This has always been a war over your energy, your altitude, and your internal alignment. They are not attacking your reality. They are attacking the devastating mirror you hold up to their stagnation. The double life they accuse you of living is nothing more than a ghost story they tell themselves to avoid doing the heavy lifting of their own spiritual evolution. They are fighting shadows, exhausting themselves against the impenetrable walls of your peace, and using you as an excuse for their own refusal to grow. So, here is your final reminder, chosen one. You do not need to step into the courtroom of their opinions to defend yourself. You do not need to perform. You do not need to seek revenge. And you absolutely do not need to provide evidence of your authenticity to people who are entirely committed to misunderstanding you. Let them talk. Let them spin their goofy, frantic little tales. Let them juggle their fragile glass balls until they drop them. Your only job is to maintain your architectural integrity. Keep stacking your bricks on solid ground. Keep walking in your purpose. Keep starving their chaos with your profound, unshakable silence. Your success and your peace will be the only response they ever receive, and it will be the one response they can never refute. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, drop a comment with what point hit you hardest, and share this video with someone who needs the reminder. Stay chosen, stay blessed.